So I found one in Phoenix, which is a 6-hour drive from El Paso, my hometown. So my wife drove me up there. I looked at it, rode it on the highway for a few exits, and immediately I could tell that I was going to be happy with that bike. The handling felt great at both low and high speeds, and the controls and everything were fairly intuitive. Um, this is a carbureted bike, which is, as far as Honda goes, their carburation is just has much smoother, intuitive fueling than their fuel-injected bikes. They still haven't gotten their fuel injection perfect. I think Suzuki and Kawasaki have done a better job with fuel injection. But the only experience I have with a Kawasaki, for any length of time was my Ninja 500, and that was carbureted, and that had a very, very smooth throttle response. But just based on what I've read on other bikes, I have ridden a couple of Suzuki's, a GSXR 750 and a GSXR 1000 that I thought had pretty smooth fueling. But yeah, so this bike's throttle response and fueling feel much better than my VFR 800 did. Similar horsepower to the VFR 800, similar configuration. It's a V4, but in this case the V is oriented like this instead of like this on the VFR 800. So that allows it to be placed lower in the frame, and it's got a very low center of gravity from the engine's position, and also the fuel tank. This is not the fuel tank. This is just an airbox cover. It's plastic. The majority of the fuel tank is actually underneath the seat, so that contributes to a low center of gravity as well. Yeah, so I like the throttle, the acceleration on this bike. It only has an 8,000 RPM red line, but being an 1100 engine, it is pretty torquey, and it doesn't feel like you need to rev the heck out of it to get going. Anything above 3,000 RPM feels pretty torquey. Other things I like about the bike, well, I like the fact that it has traction control and ABS. That's one of the problems with the ST1300, that they got rid of the traction control, I guess, as a cost savings. And yeah, it's surprising. This is a 1993 bike, and it's surprising that it has both traction control and ABS. I also like the shaft drive. Maintenance free for the most part. You do have to change the oil in the shaft drive periodically. Also, it's got carburetors, but it doesn't have a petcock. It has an automatic petcock of sorts. I haven't looked at the technical details of it too much, but I have an older VF 500 that I'm working on, and that one, the petcock, is one of the main problems with it leaking the diaphragms, and I've been messing with that for a while. Other neat features I like the headlight height adjustment. Very easy to turn and adjust the headlights while you're out riding. Things I don't like about the bike, I would say the front brake doesn't feel as strong as what I'd like. It's okay. It actually got a lot better. I guess initially the lever was set out quite a bit further than I like. So after adjusting the front brake lever and bringing it in closer, it does feel better. I can apply more pressure on the brakes, but the front brake is definitely not as strong as it was on the VFR 800. But then, looking at the size of the discs on this bike, the rear disc is much bigger than on a lot of bikes. So you can tell that more of the braking power on this particular bike does come from the rear brake than what I'm used to on sportier bikes. And that makes sense, as you do have a lot more weight on the back of this bike, from the shaft drive and your luggage and passengers. The fuel cell is also underneath the seat, so that puts more weight on the back of the bike. So you do have more braking power in the rear. Not as much as on a cruiser probably, but more than on a VFR 800 or sportier bike. And I have gotten the ABS to kick in during my safety inspection dynamic test they make you do here in Texas. So I know the ABS is working. One issue with the bike is that when the engine comes up to full temperature, or actually when the cooling fan kicks in, and when the temperature is hot enough for the cooling fan to kick in, I do get some abrupt throttle response right off of idle as I'm taking off of a light, and I'm not sure what that's due to. It almost seems like the traction control is kicking in and thinking it needs to cut power. But I don't know, it could be a fueling problem, a carburetor issue, but it's very minor and it doesn't happen too often, but it is noticeable. The seat on this bike is the most comfortable motorcycle seat I've ever sat on, but it's not the stock seat. It's a Corbin seat that the previous owner then had reupholstered with marine grade vinyl and added foam. So you really can't get this exact seat anywhere, and I'm lucky that the previous owner, I guess, picked a good upholstery company. Well, actually, the company that he uses or that he used, I think he mentioned the Phoenix Police Department was using it to customize their motorcycle or police motorcycle seats as well. So the guy seems to be renowned in the Phoenix area for being able to produce comfortable bike seats rather. So this bike is a 1993 bike again. I bought it with about 59,000 miles on it. It's at 61,000 now, and I paid $3,300 for it. The bike was in really good shape, really nothing I needed to work on. It's got a tiny oil leak at the alternator, which it's not enough to even drop a single drop of oil on my garage. But I think it does drop a tiny drop of oil periodically onto the exhaust when you're riding, and you can kind of smell that little drop of oil vaporize. But eventually the alternator is one of the weak spots of this bike. I'm going to have to swap that out probably for a higher current alternator. Right now I'm keeping the battery on a battery tender periodically just to make sure that it's charged properly. I think the alternator on the 93 bikes was a little bit weaker. It's only a 28 amp alternator, I believe, and then the later bikes got a 40 amp or 40 something amp. So that's it for my review of the bike. I really like it. I think it's an awesome value for what I paid for it. It meets all my needs. I've gone on weekend rides with some guys on Ducatis and GSXR 750s, and after a 40-minute ride, I'm really only 20 seconds or so behind them. I actually pretty much catch up to them once we get into the slower streets. So yeah, it handles very well. Feels very stable and safe. And I really like it. I think it's the bike I've had that I've have the least complaints about, really, or the least areas where I say I wish it could improve in this. So, I'm hoping to keep this for quite a bit longer than any of my previous motorcycles. The most I've ever kept a motorcycle before has been about 2 years. But I expect to keep this guy quite a bit longer.